Hi everyone, it's Denise with Dobby Books, and today I want to discuss a book that I just finished. It was the last book in the series when I was studying Old Western culture, and this ended the Roman times. It also links into medieval times, and it's Boethius' The Consolation of Philosophy. You could consider Boethius one of the first of the medieval writers, if you will, the last of the Roman writers. He sits in both. It was written in 524 AD. So, considering that the Middle Ages are roughly dated from 500 to 1500 AD, some would say 400 to 1400 AD, Boethius was right at the beginning. And Boethius was a Roman, educated in the Roman traditional fashion, a way that we would refer to today as the classical liberal arts. So he knew his Latin. I'm going to assume he knew his Greek. He studied rhetoric and logic and later music and astronomy and geometry and mathematics, etc. And this was a way of education that was fading out in Rome because Rome had been sacked for the last time. It was now ruled by its very first non-Roman emperor, Theodoric. And it was under Theodoric's rule that Boethius also served. And because Boethius was concerned about preserving the good things about Rome, he worked, and before he even get there, he was a man who had a lot of success in his career. Besides his great education, he rubbed shoulders with the right people. He was able to serve in Roman political life. His sons also attained positions in, I think it was in the Senate, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be. He had a lot of reason to be happy. He also was wealthy, so he had respect and he had wealth. His children were doing well, so he was having a very good life. And because he wanted to preserve the Senate and serve Rome and serve the church, because Boethius was a Christian, the leadership at the time, the society at the time, because Rome was losing its influence and now the barbarians were ruling, they couldn't completely understand what Boethius did, and it did set him up from those who found it convenient for themselves to be accused unjustly. One of them was, I made some notes so I wouldn't forget. Part of what he tried to do to preserve Roman tradition, the good stuff about the Roman tradition with the writers and the literature, etc., was he started translating many of the texts there in order to preserve them. If it weren't for Boethius, we would have lost a lot of things. So he really is someone to be thanked for doing that. He also stood out because he kept the old Roman ways in an empire that was becoming increasingly less Roman. He had mathematical skills. I know it sounds silly, but when you think of how the Romans were educated, it involved geometry, astronomy, math. This was normal. Okay? But for the barbarian culture that had moved in, who weren't really exposed to this, didn't have any knowledge of this, Boethius's mathematical skills placed him under suspicion. So it was convenient for those who wanted to serve themselves and remain in that sphere of power with the king to use Boethius's mathematical skills to feed ridiculous rumors, and that was that he was a magician. And barbarians they were kind of freaked out by magicians because, they were evil. And because Boethius was striving to also serve the church because he was a Christian, there was the church in the east and the church in the west. They were still one church, but they tended to bicker a lot time. It was not unusual for the East to have some sort of issue with the West and vice versa. They were like cousins who loved each other, but they weren't too crazy about each other, kind of like that thing. Boethius wanted to help the church at this particular time. I don't remember what the particular doctrine was, what the quibble was about. But they were just banging heads with each other. They weren't getting anywhere with it. And Boethius wanted to work some way of getting them to come to an agreement. And when he did that, it was another convenient excuse, again, for those who were hungry for power, to accuse him of being a political usurper. And it's under this dark cloud of people just that vying for power and wanting to push him out and get themselves in, that Boethius finds himself arrested. And he didn't know if he would live or be executed. He was hoping he'd get released. But when he was in prison, he was depressed, and he was lamenting his loss of fortune and he was an innocent man. And he just couldn't understand why, why these evil people getting away with this. And he was a good person, or he considered himself a good person trying to do the right thing, and look what he got for it. So he wasn't very happy. And he was writing and reflecting in prison, and this is what he put together, this Consolation of Philosophy. And he sets it up that as he was lamenting and crying and feeling all down in the dumps, that Lady Philosophy came to visit him. This is a story. And I love how he sets it up, where he gives you this beautiful imagery. And this book is a combination of verse and prose. And he talks about philosophy as the nurse who took care of him in youth, which is the title of the book. That was his Consolation Philosophy. Philosophy, I guess, when we're familiar with it, it's a good way of reflecting and meditating and sort of decluttering our minds. So I can see how he viewed philosophy so well. I mean, he was he's a very educated man. And some parts here that I made markers for. I don't think I'm going to cover all of them because I don't want to take up too much time, but there's some points that I wanted to bring out. And Philosophy sits down with him. She asks him why he's feeling down. He talks about what he's gone through, that he's an innocent man, and that he doesn't understand why this is happening to him. And Philosophy tries to tell him that he is mistaken, that he's looking at all this the wrong way. So she begins by asking him, can I ask you a series of questions, because I want to see where you're at. So she would know where to start. So she begins the questions. And some of them are, what are the means by which you think he guides? And he's talking about, go back. Do you believe that this life consists of haphazard and chance events, or do you think it is governed by some rational principle? Next question, do you remember what is the end and purpose of things and the goal to which the whole of nature is directed? Do you know the source from which all things come? Tell me what man is. It seems so deep. And Philosophy, basically, starting from there, she starts to go step by step, a Socratic dialogue with Boethius to help him declutter mind and to focus on the true things, to get him, what's the term they use when they calibrate? When they need to calibrate something, the scale is off and they need to reset it and whatever. So she's resetting him and getting him starting to look at things realistically, so he can change his point of view. And then in this interaction, Fortune comes in, and Fortune is very, defensive and sort of nonchalant, and says, "Why are you saying that that I took anything from you. It wasn't yours in the first place. It was mine. And what's mine comes with me and leaves with me. You never had it in the first place. And in referring to Fortune's wheel, she says, and constancy is my very essence. It is the game I never cease to play as I turn my wheel in its ever-changing circle, filled with joy as I bring the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. So that's where we get the term Wheel of Fortune, is that. And she is the one that controls that. And she's trying to tell him, don't think that that wealth was yours. No. It was mine. And I just sort of gave it to you for a little while, but I could take it whenever. So when Boethius starts to see that these things that he viewed as his were never really his, it sort of helps him to unload some baggage. So now he's reconsidering other things, and philosophy is moving in and asking him those very basic questions. Philosophy tries to remind him where true happiness comes from. And she goes over, she kind of reviews with him what made you happy. And he talked about the esteem that he had from other people, and his wealth, the nice place he lived in, his family, his sons, accomplishments, etc. And philosophy says, why then do mortal men seek after happiness outside yourselves when it lies within you? In here, philosophy is talking about good fortune and bad fortune. And says, basically, good fortune deceives. Bad fortune is truthful. And she says, bad fortune is always truthful because by change, she shows her true fickleness. Bad fortune enlightens. Bad fortune gives men release through the recognition of how fragile a thing happiness is. Fortune can also help you see who your true friends are. And fortune says, in deserting you, fortune has taken her friends, philosophy says, in deserting you, fortune has taken her friends with her and left those who are really yours. So in this way, Boethius is able to reflect back on those who are still with him. I guess you could say it's like the layers of an onion, peeling away those layers. And she says, so you are weeping over lost riches when you have really found the most precious of all riches, friends who are true friends. All that in the effort to get him to turn, to sort of like when we turn our heads to look at something from a different point of view. This is what she's accomplishing with Boethius. There's another mark here. They talk about when Boethius brings up the question of why do the wicked go unpunished? And she says, it may seem incredible to some, but it must be the case that the wicked are less happy if they achieve their desires than if they are unable to do what they want. It's that wanting that seems to please them, but once they've gotten it, they're bored and they need something else to do. For if wickedness is the cause of their misery, it follows that their wickedness makes them the more wretched the longer it lasts. Fate versus providence is another topic they discuss. Providence is the divine reason itself. And fate is the planned order inherent in things subject to change through the medium of which providence binds everything in its own allotted place. Fate must bow to providence. Providence is a more sure thing. And there's a lot of things that they mentioned in providence, but I just want to focus on how, I was trying to get a visual on how fate differed from providence. And I kept seeing over and over in my head, providence would be this wooden ball. It's set in its shape. It's round. It rolls. It's not going to grow. It's not going to shrink. It is a steady form. It's stable. And fate, on the other hand, of course, she described herself as a wheel in this book, but I kept seeing fate in comparing it to this wooden ball as a rubber band, because it has some give to it. You could put that rubber band around the wooden ball, pull it a little bit here, and pull it a little bit there. You could let go and it maintains the shape of providence. It conforms to the shape of providence. But human beings still have some free will happening there, and they can pull here and there, but yet not wander too far from providence. That helped me understand it a little bit better. And then the next question Boethius asks, well, if God is going to foresee what's going to happen anyway, when referring to man's free will, changing it a little bit, he's thinking, well, how can we have free will anyway if God already knew it was going to happen? So philosophy tries to square that away from him. Tries to clarify that. That should be a better way to say it. And this is how I summarized it. In referring to providence, to God, in referring to God's foreknowledge, this is what philosophy had to say. God does not foresee the future. Rather, his existence is all time. At the same time. There is no past, no present, and no future. God is. Time is. It's just one thing. Whereas for us, there's morning, afternoon, night, next day, yesterday, there's tomorrow, we look to the future. Our lives are more compartmentalized. And that is not so, philosophy says, with God. So we can't say he foresees. And her explanation goes like this. If you wish to consider then the foreknowledge or prevision by which he discovers all things, it will be more correct to think of it not as a kind of foreknowledge of the future, but as the knowledge of a never-ending presence. I thought that was cool. That was, yes, that was it. So those are the points I wanted to make there. This really is an excellent book. It comes in 5 books. You can read one book a day, or you can plow through it in one reading. I did 1 book per day. That was a good enough pace. And I would recommend you have a pencil at hand to mark little notes as you go along, because at certain points you are going to stop and just go, because your brain has to stop and kind of reword it in your mind so you can really absorb what's being said, or you've got to go back and reread a little bit. But this really is an awesome book. This is something that I would definitely read over again. And of course, whenever you're reading anything that runs a little bit deep, you are going to get more out of it the more often you read. So this I would recommend. Boethius's The Consolation of Philosophy. And that's it, everyone. I don't want to talk about anything else right now because I've taken up enough time. Thank you very much for hanging around with me for these other 20 minutes, for the last 20 minutes. And if you like what you've been seeing and hearing, press that like and subscribe button. And thanks again, everyone. Stay happy. Bye-bye.